Hearing the roars of the monsters, everyone began to panic. Many of the students had flashbacks to the last time there was a large number of monsters coming towards them. Ha-Yun did her best in trying to gain control of the situation, but was failing. "Master, what would you like us to do?" Queen whispered into his ear. His creations were likely eager to make up for their failings. Due to the special circumstances, he thought it would be a good idea to have some fun with this. "Feel free to go all out. I do not mind if my classmates get a taste of how much power you guys wield." "Yes, Master," she grinned at the prospect of showing off in front of him. Walking over to her fellow created, Queen whispered his orders. Judging by their facial expressions, all of them enjoyed the thought of flexing their muscles. Queen found some place away from the students and adventurers and stood resolute like some Amazonian. "From the realm all who live end up, I, your queen, demand your presence. Like a swarm, rise. Overwhelm all who stand before me. Flood the living." The ground began to crack, and a bright light seemed to pierce this world. Hands and other appendages began to reach out of the ground. There was a mixture of hands with pure white bones and armored arms rising out of the ground. Students stopped panicking as they began to witness the surge of undead soldiers. Answering Queen's call, the ground opened up like some gaping maw. A black light seemed to pulsate out of the hole in the ground. Han made his way towards the opening and looked down into the pit. There was an endless number of undead creatures of all types crawling up the walls. Without needing any orders, they parted to not get in Han's way. He felt like some kind of prophet from the divine parting and ocean of the dead. Unlike the previous time Queen had used her powers against the Empire, these creatures didn't get into a proper formation. They just appeared to swarm all over the field. Slowly, the undead formed a perimeter around them as more kept coming out. Off in the distance, it looked like the ground was moving. He was slightly confused, but then realized that it wasn't the ground, but monsters. This was a lot more than what he was expecting. When it came to these types of scenarios, the key was dealing as much damage at once and have it spread out. He needed to use something with a decent area of effect. The thought of going really crazy did come to mind, but he had to find a balance due to his classmates being nearby. Pointing a finger at the monsters, he just imagined a massive attack. There was a dome of fire that suddenly began spreading out, engulfing all the monsters. The force of the blast caused a gust of wind to blow at them. It felt like they were in front of a hurricane, causing almost all the students to be flung back. "I did not think that was going to happen. It never does in anime shows," he muttered. Looking at where a crater formed from the blast, there was an empty spot that was free of monsters, but it didn't stay open for long. "That was unexpected," was all that he could say. A part of him thought of doing the same thing, but was worried for those behind who were getting back on their feet. From their facial expression, the sight of such a large explosion may have short-circuited their minds. "Instead of that, how about this?" Han spoke, lifting a finger and pointing it at the sky. Above him, there were dark and menacing clouds that appeared. Inside of them were giant flashes of light, hinting at the amount of power that was being held inside. "That should be enough." He quickly pointed at the ground, and thousands of lightning bolts came crashing to the ground. The sight of it was like being asleep in a dark room and having someone turn on the light. The thunder that quickly followed reverberated deep inside his chest. Screams could be heard from everyone. Once everyone could see in front of them, almost all the monsters were gone. Feeling a little more satisfied, he patted himself on the back. "Queen, send out your undead to deal with the remaining monsters." Though almost all of them were incinerated, like a tree in the middle of the field, there was enough to require the army of undead. Yes, Master, Queen spoke up and commanded her army to move out. He watched as they made their way and began slashing, eating, and killing the remainders. After feeling a sense of accomplishment and hearing the cheering of the students and adventurers, there was a similar feeling of the ground vibrating. You gotta be shitting me, Han yelled out. Over the horizon, there was another massive flow of monsters that were heading over to them. What is with this place? He yelled in frustration. It was like dealing with a swarm of locusts, and they were the crops. Fine, you wanna play that game? He yelled out at them. Raising his finger towards the sky, he placed all of his anger and frustration into his attack. Behind him, everyone saw that he was getting ready to repeat the onslaught of lightning strikes and drop to the ground, covering their heads. Jutting his finger at the oncoming swarm, he unleashed the pent-up power. It was like a screen of pure white flashed in front of him, making him close his eyes. With his eyes closed, he could only hear the constant sound of lightning striking the ground. It felt as if the entire continent was shuddering from the power of his attack. You need to stop! He thought he heard something other than the lightning. Turning his head, Han saw Ha-Yun with her arms raised, trying to protect her eyes. She was yelling something at him, and it was then he realized what she was trying to say. You need to stop! Ha-Yun was screaming out. Halting the attack, the silence was palpable with the heavy ozone smell in the air. Looking around, he realized that the area they were in was now raised up, as if someone had pressed a giant donut into the ground while they were in the middle of the hole. The lightning had been so intense that it actually destroyed the ground around them. All that remained was the charred up body of all the monsters. Ha-Yun was breathing heavily from having to shout so long to catch his attention. The students who were huddling on the ground looked around to see if it was okay for them to get up. Several of them were shaking after witnessing such an event. Many of them looked over at where Han was standing and felt like they were seeing him for the first time. Looking at Ha-Yun, Han said, "We should probably start heading out before more monsters start to appear." Ha-Yun only nodded her head, still a little surprised by what had happened. "What was that, E?" Jim and everyone else rushed up to him. "I do not think this is the best time to talk about this," Han cautioned them.